I should also say for everyone here, it's B Corp month. So March is the designated month that B Lab calls B Corp month. So this is one of the ways that we're celebrating. We'll get started, I'd say probably at 12:03. So if you just want to share in the chat where you're located, I'm going to be doing the slides, and then Naman will be manning the chat, and we'll be kind of working this out together. I'm based in New York, and Naman and I started doing these in October, I think, November. So we do this the first Wednesday of every month, just to give an overview about B Corp, talk about B Corp with people that are curious. And it ends up being a good session where people share their experiences and how they have found B Corp to be, and then what questions they have.
Welcome everybody to Level Up Your Business, the Power of Influence. So we will be starting promptly in about 4 minutes.
Someone's listening to another one. Hi, Merritt. Hi, Emily. Hi, Alice. If you could just mute yourself. How do I mute everybody?
For your help.
There we go. Thank you. Okay, we're going to get started, and I would say 1 minute. Can everyone see my screen, or did I stop that? Stopped. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for rolling with this. I'm trying to read my notes and do the screen. So, okay, let's get started. So we'll have some people trickle in. I am recording this just to let everyone know. And so if you could just type in the chat where you're located, what you're hoping to learn today. I think we have people at different kind of areas of B Corp understanding. So we're going to go through the slides. We'll definitely have time for questions and discussions at the end. So if you have questions, you can put them in the chat and we will get to them at the end. Okay, so we're going to do intros, a B Corp overview, and then we'll have time at the end for questions and discussions. And so Naman, you want to go first to introduce ourselves?
Sure. Hey everyone, thanks for joining in today. My name is Naman. I stay in Toronto, Canada, but right now I'm staying with my family here in India for the past couple of months. I run a video podcast / online media platform called Epic, where we curate stories of sustainable and social impact startups across the globe. And I have been co-hosting this with Eliza for the past few months, and I'm myself learning about the B Corp journey through these sessions. Thanks again for joining us today.
Awesome. And I'm Eliza Erskine. I am the founder of Buoy Consulting. We are a sustainability consulting firm that helps small and mid-sized companies with strategy, reporting, and B Corp certification. So I started Buoy to help have small businesses have the same benefits as large corporations in regards to sustainability. So I love talking about B Corp and have helped, numerous companies across industries with the application. So I'm excited to share those experiences and hear where other people are at this point. So let's go to the next slide. So B Corp certification. B Corp certifies your company to a social and environmental standard. It's a certification that's given by a group called B Lab. And the certification means that you have passed B Lab's criteria and are approved as a company that incorporates people, planet, and profit into your business structure. So to become a B Corp, you have to fill out an online assessment, you change your legal standing to a benefit corporation, and you pay a fee to get certified. So I think a good way to kind of explain the certification is to look at companies that already have the certification. So Patagonia, Eileen Fisher, Clean Canteen, these companies that I've put here. I think we all look at those companies and think, yes, those are companies that are definitely taking the environment into account, and they're definitely taking people into account as well. So certification is open to any type of business, as long as you're for profit. So you can be a product or service-based company and get the B Corp certification. And certification looks at the strength of your business in 5 main areas: workers, environment, community, customers, and governance. So it's really a holistic look at your business, focusing on these areas, which we'll get into in more detail. So why get certified? Companies have different reasons for getting certified, but they really look at certification as a sort of stamp of approval for their values and the actions that they're taking to support the planet. So especially for companies that are growing, that don't have a sustainability team, but know that they're taking action on sustainability, the certification process is a great way to kind of cement those sustainability practices and prove that you're taking action. So there are tons of statistics now how B Corps grow faster than regular businesses. They have better customer retention and have performed better during the pandemic. And on this slide, you can see quotes from B Corp companies that speak to the other benefits. So B Corps now are saying how it's great for hiring. They no longer have to look for people to hire. Employees are coming to them. Employees want to work at B Corp. Now there are job boards that are for B Corps specifically. So employees are definitely a reason, recruiting. And then the other reason is businesses want to do B Corps with, or businesses want to do business with other companies that share their values, and B Corp is a way of signifying these are the values that we have, and companies are definitely looking for like-minded businesses. I've had a lot of conversations recently with companies that see B Corp as a way to help if they're in a position where they're looking for clients and they're, a B2B company. Having a B Corp standard allows them to have conversations with other B Corps. So it really kind of depends on the business what specific benefits people are looking for, but there are a lot of benefits. And then, you look at B Corps like Ben & Jerry's, Patagonia. These are companies with a significant following. They're constantly in the news. They're constantly sort of held as the standard of companies making explicit environmental commitments. So that's another way to look at it that way. So let's talk about the certification process. So to get certified, you have to complete the B Corp Impact Assessment. Again, that's through B Lab. It's between 100 and 120 questions in those 5 areas that I mentioned earlier: workers, environment, governance, community, customers. And you have to receive a score of 80 or above in order to get certified. So each question is weighted differently, but there are point values for each question. And then you also have to show proof or documentation of each answer. So if you're answering a question in the affirmative, you need to show proof that you're actually taking those steps in your business. And then the next step, after you've completed the assessment, once you have enough points, you submit your assessment to B Lab. They review it, and they'll ask you kind of some follow-up questions, and then you have a meeting with an employee at B Lab, and you go through the application. And if you're still at 80 or above by the end of the review, then you're approved. And then the legal requirement is what comes next. So that the legal requirement can vary by state, but the legal change that you have to make is that you are certifying your company as a benefit corporation. So the benefit denotes that you are equally taking into account people, planet, and profit. And on the right, these are some types of questions. So they'll ask you what percentage of your management is female, management from underrepresented populations. There's different questions on supplier programs, and then different things about your working environment. Okay, so let's talk about the assessment. This is kind of the meat and potatoes of getting certified. And I think this is where a lot of companies get tripped up. And we can talk more about this as people have questions at the end too. So the assessment, it is based on your business type and industry. So each assessment is a little bit different depending on those factors. And the assessment is an online platform. It's free. So you go to B Lab's website, you start the assessment, and you go through answering questions in those areas and providing data on your company. So each point is weighted differently. There's different questions. Again, like if we're talking about percentage of women in management, depending on the percentage, if it's 100%, that will be scored higher than if it's at, say, 5 or 10%. The points and questions are also weighted differently based on your industry and the type of business that you have, and then how you answer other questions. So for example, if you're a service-based company, they're not going to ask you a ton of questions about manufacturing and different environmental things because those don't apply to your business. So there's a lot of discussion around the 80 points that you need to be certified. So 80 points is the minimum that you need to be certified. However, when you meet with B Corp and you go through, B Corp has said that most companies will drop at least 5 points. So if you're in a place where you're applying and you're completing the assessment, you definitely want to be applying at above 80 points. I recommend applying at the minimum and at least an 85 or an 87, just to kind of give yourself that extra buffer so that when you're meeting with B Lab, you have all of the information and you have enough points. So, and then on the side, again, these are some other questions that they ask. So renewable energy, how much energy are you using? How efficient is your facility? Are you currently tracking greenhouse gas emissions? Those are just some other question samples. Okay, common questions. So these are the questions that I get asked a lot during the assessment. So the first is how long it will take. This is far and away the question that I get asked the most. Unfortunately, the answer is I don't know. It really depends on your business. So I'll try and give some context and kind of explain this a little bit more. So timing is tricky. And when you're trying to think about how long it will take, there's two things that you should consider. One is how much do you have documented already to answer the questions? And then what resources do you have to allocate to the assessment? There's no average because it really depends on your company, the size of your company. But this is definitely something that is not sort of an afternoon activity. It's a really robust assessment, and it takes some time to complete the assessment and then to gather data. So if you're trying to think of how long it will take, those are kind of some things to keep in mind. The other thing, if you're looking at the certification process as a whole, B Corp is becoming increasingly popular. There was a 30% increase in applications, I think between April and August of last year. So B Lab is working with a queue on their end. 2 weeks ago, B Lab told me right now there's about a 5-month queue once you have submitted the application. So there's time for you to go through the assessment, and then there's time for you to review with B Lab. So those are just some things to keep in mind as you're kind of planning through the process. I do know that B Lab is working on improving the process on their end, just to make it shorter. And again, a lot of that, if you're a smaller company, your queue is going to be different than if you have 4 locations and 1,500 employees. So the next question that I get is, I don't do fill in the blank. Is that okay? I don't have a lot of environmental activities. I don't have a lot to show in one area. For the most part, that is fine. I really recommend that companies lean into the areas that they do have. If you're looking into B Corp and you're using the assessment to, support the values that you already have, chances are you will have enough to show for the application. You'll need to show some things, definitely, but again, depending on your industry and documentation, B Corp aligns the questions to your industry. So a service-based company, again, environmental questions are going to be different than a product-based company. So the last question that I get a lot, how much does it cost? If you go to B Lab's website, they do have a list of pricing, and pricing is based on revenue. I think right now it's $1,000 annually to certify if your revenue is under $150,000, and then it goes up from there. But if you go on B Lab website or just Google B Lab pricing, you'll see it on there. So, okay, these are some things to keep in mind as you're going through the assessment. This is sort of my tips and tricks section. So the first is that B Corp is transparent and also private. So this is sort of a unique thing about it. By that, I mean, no one has to know that you've started the assessment. Once you log in, it's between you and B Lab that you have started the assessment, unless you tell people, obviously. But the points, as you're going through the assessment, those are transparent. So as soon as you start the assessment, you'll be able to see all of the questions and all of the points based on your answers. So for example, going back to the percentage of management that's female, if right now it's at 20%, but you're hiring someone and oh, next month, it could be closer to 30. You can go in the assessment and kind of play around with different questions and see how the point values change on that based on your answer. So the other thing to keep in mind is that B Lab wants to help you. They have a ton of resources on their website. They offer office hours if you want to talk through the assessment. They're really motivated to get people certified, and they want to be of service. So when you sign up for the assessment, you'll get emails from them. They have email support and FAQs on their website. There's FAQs within the assessment to answer different questions that you have and different definitions. It's really set up in a way, I think, to support you and guide you as you go through the assessment. So the other tip that I recommend that you really lean into, I said this a little bit earlier, but lean into your company structure and culture and type. So if you have really strong employee benefits and engagement, use that as your starting point and go with that to continue to build points. If you have a team, use your team to help you through the assessment process. You can use it as a goal setting tool. It's really malleable in that way that you can complete the assessment with help from your team if you want that. So the last thing to keep in mind is that time is on your side. So there's no time requirement for this. Once you start the assessment, you can take as long as you want. Obviously, that's good and bad because you're kind of the master of your own way of doing this. So they're not holding you to any kind of standard while you're still in the assessment. So you can go at your own pace. Anyone can start the assessment. Anyone can keep going. The only sort of time thing that you're bound by is that every year you have to report revenue. So if you've been doing it over 18 months, you will have to update some of those revenue things. And then obviously as anything changes, as time goes on, you'll want to update those questions as well. But I do want to emphasize that, it's free to start. It's transparent. Anybody can go in and look at the assessment, see how it works. So I really encourage you to go on and look at it and see what you can find. So I have some resources. I will share them at the end, and I'll send them all in an email at the end as well. But I definitely recommend going to the B Lab website and looking at the different resources they have, going onto the assessment, and then looking at the legal requirements. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't speak to those different requirements. It also varies by state and country. And so I recommend that you go on that just to check it out that way. So I just have one other slide before questions. So let's do questions now. And let me stop this so I can see the
Eliza,
chat. Yeah, go ahead.
Merit wants you to go through the 5 areas once again.
Okay, yeah, sure. Let's go back up to that slide. These 5 areas: workers, governance, community, and environment. So workers means employees. And that's a lot of questions on different employee benefits, how you're surveying employees, how you're treating employees, demographic information for employees. Governance focuses on your mission statement. Right now, do you have a system in place where your management is held to environmental data as part of employee reviews? How kind of embedded are these different environmental and social standards into your company right now? Customers is customers. So things like how you treat customer data, getting feedback from customers. And then environment is, again, those kind of energy indicators, asking about if you're taking biodiversity things into account. Are you screening things for environment? Have you set goals around emissions? And then community is suppliers and other sort of community focused indicators, I would say. So are you donating to nonprofits? What else are you doing to kind of benefit your community at large? Does that help answer the question? Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now so that I can go in the chat. Any other questions, Simon, that stuck out?
I think Christian wanted to know, how has B Corp evolved in the last few years?
How has B Corp evolved in the last few years? I think the main way that it's evolved is I'll talk about sort of internally, and then I'll talk about the reception, I guess. So internally, B Corp has done a lot of work to make sure they're asking the right questions. They're getting feedback from current B Corps about, should we be talking about the environment more? How should we be weighting questions? Is there enough emphasis on different suppliers? And they're coming out with updates to the assessment. I think now they're on version like 7. So they're constantly sort of adjusting what they're asking and how they're weighting things. And as different types of companies come online and products come online, they've kind of had to adjust different things behind the scenes too. B Corp does a lot of look into companies' backgrounds, and they basically do a background check. So there's been discussions lately about, if a company is involved in, say, gambling, is that acceptable for them to become a B Corp? There was an issue a couple weeks ago about a B Corp that was involved in government contracts with the Department of Homeland Security. So as sort of those things have evolved, B Corp has had to evolve with it. I think the biggest change from the consumer side, and just, I would say the external thing is how companies are using it to kind of brand themselves. Now they're definitely using it to attract employees, to attract customers. It's kind of taken on a life of its own in some way as more and more customers are aware of it, and are making purchasing decisions based on it. So I think those are some things that I've noticed. Does that answer your question? Okay, Anna is asking, do you recertify each year? How do changes affect your continued status? B Corp, you have to recertify every 3 years. So the recertification process, it's basically going through the assessment again and just checking to make sure you're still doing all of those things. And any changes that you make internally, you still have to hit that 80 or above threshold. So depending on how that changes, that could affect your certification. But if you're just sort of undergoing normal business activities where you're growing and maybe you're in a new market, if you've introduced a new product, those things shouldn't change your assessment as long as you keep up the scores. Can family businesses become B Corps? Yes, as long as you are a for-profit business, you can become a B Corp. So Anna says, in our case, a lot of categories around management, governance, employee benefits would be less applicable. So is it realistic to seek B Corp status? I think, Anna, what I would ask is, what are you hoping to get from it? And what are you hoping the outcome will be? There's sort of two categories of businesses that are looking at B Corp. Ones that say, we already have all these things in place. We're already tracking environmental data. And they're using B Corp to kind of approve that standard and give proof of that. And other companies maybe that start B Corp and go through the assessment and maybe are at 60 points and want to use the B Corp framework to improve. So if, Anna, you're looking at the framework and you're looking at a lot of the questions and you're thinking, oh, that is something that we want to do for our business, B Corp can be a good way to create that framework and move that. But if you're asking it's realistic, I think it's realistic. Obviously not having seen too much of your business, but I think a lot of companies have enough that they're probably within 10 or 20 points. And if they want to make the changes and they see how that would benefit their business, then it's realistic to make those changes and get the status. Shannon says, is there a way for me to review the specific questions? Oh, sorry, I lost it. We would need to answer for our company, size, industry, type of business. Yes, Shannon, if you go to B Corp's website and just start the assessment, the first questions it will ask you will be those categorizing questions. So you'll have to say your number of employees, your industry, your type of business, and then that will give you your assessment. And again, it's between you and B Lab. If you get to that point and you say, nope, this isn't for me, or I want to table that for a couple months, that's fine. But there's no penalty for doing that. So I would definitely recommend that you go in and put in your information and then see what the questions are based on that. And that should take, I would say, maybe 10 to 12 minutes. It's the sort of qualifying questions are not, they're not a lot. Erica asks, how much does certification cost? Does it depend on your revenue or number of employees? It is revenue dependent. So if you go to B Lab's website or just Google B Lab costs, B Corp costs, there's a fee schedule. And I'll send that in the resources too in the follow-up email. Is the annual cost based on when you start the assessment or receive status? So when you're going through the assessment, they will ask you for your revenue for the previous year. And it sort of shifts as it's later in the year if you have current revenue figures. So whatever revenue you present when you're submitting the assessment, that's the revenue that you will be charged with. Any other questions? Has anybody started the assessment or wants to share their experience or how it's been? Or anybody has any other things in the chat? I do want to share, if you are thinking about B Corp or are looking, we offer a 90-minute strategy session where we sit down together and go through your assessment and sort of, if you're at a point where you're like, I just need 15 more points, where should I be focusing? We can talk about that and go through. And then Naman and I are hosting at the end of March. We're calling it a B Corp community sprint. So we're going to be together for 90 minutes and you sign up and we all are going to be working on our B Corp together. So a lot of what we've seen with B Corps is people get really excited and then it just becomes another thing on the to-do list and it's hard to carve out time. So we're hoping that this gives people the time to focus on the assessment and we'll kind of all be on Zoom and then we can talk about it and I'll be there to answer questions. So it's just another way to kind of keep B Corp top of mind in that way. Okay, we have another question. My interest is twofold. I've launched a passion project that is sustainable realm after 20 plus years in the fashion industry and became tired of making unnecessary products that were not produced in a healthy manner. My brand is nowhere near big enough not to apply for B Corp yet, I assume, the first question. Any size company can be a B Corp. If you're a single person, you can be a B Corp. There's no size limitation. As long as you have revenue, you can become a B Corp. If you don't have revenue yet, if you're under a year old, you can apply for pending B Corp status too. So that's to answer the first part of the question. The second part of this question, I have been contacted by a former mass producing supplier who was interested in my help from a creative aspect to help them grow their sustainable offerings and implement them into their production methods. I am not an expert in sustainability and I'm no way pretending to be. However, I'm trying to learn as much about all topics related. Wondering if my potential supplier would be able to become a B Corp. I would definitely float it with them. I think, I know the fashion realm also uses the Hague Index. I am not a fashion sustainability person. There are people on this chat though. So if you are a fashion sustainability person, raise your hand and put that in the chat so that you guys can connect and talk about that. I would definitely say if they want to create a more sustainable business, then B Corp is a way to do that, especially from a supplier perspective. Shannon says the payment is due upon approval of B Corp status. Yes, payment is the final thing that you have to do. So you'll put in the assessment, you'll review with B Lab. They will say, great, you're approved. You do the legal change and then you pay. So that's the end thing. Erica, can you repeat what you said if you are under a year in business? So if you're under a year in business, B Corp has a system, it's called pending B Corp. And that basically just means pending approval for your 1 year in business. Excuse me, you can become B Corp. Erica says her 1 year anniversary is May 1st. So you can apply now, and then by the time everything happens and you get it, it will be after May 1st. So you'll be fine. Is there a minimum revenue to be considered? No, there's no minimum. As long as you are, you do have revenue. You're welcome. Merritt says, that's great that even a solo biz can do it. Yes, definitely. And I think the interesting part about B Corp is even if you are not you're not interested in the full certification, even going through the assessment can be extremely eye-opening and helpful if you're in this place of, I have a business, I want to be making a better impact, I want to be thinking about these things. How do I do that? B Corp forces you to ask those questions and look at things like, oh, here's my employee handbook, or what kind of questions should I be asking my suppliers? How should I be talking to employees? Or, you know, Merritt, I know that you're a service-based business, how, as am I, you know, how are we talking to clients about these types of things? How are we supporting them? So B Corp, I think, offers a nice framework, even if you don't get through the assessment, just to begin thinking about these things. And because it's free, I think that's kind of a unique benefit. I had no idea that my small business would even be considered. Right? I mean, I think especially when it's, you know, you see like Patagonia and Ben and Jerry's, like those are sort of the B Corp symbols. I'm glad that we do these sessions because I think a lot of people walk away and are like, oh, you know, you get to be in that category with Patagonia and Ben and Jerry's, which I think is really cool. And then once you are certified, there is, they call it the Beehive. And then you have access to all of the other B Corps. So there's events, you can email them. There's different B local communities. There's ones in New York. Each state has groups of B Corps that want to start, you know, talking about this and kind of pushing each other forward, and people are sharing strategies and how they're engaging with suppliers. So once you're in the community, it's really I think an open place to be able to talk and share different things. Erica says, when is the co-working session? It is March 26th, I think. It's the last Friday. Yes, you'll be able to ask questions during that. I'll send all that information to at the end in a follow-up email so that you have it. Any other questions or, oh, thanks, Ellen. If anybody wants to share their experience or, you know, why they're curious about B Corp, what they've seen about it, unmute yourself. Or I'll just keep talking about it. Naman, anything you want to add or? Oh, good. Thanks, Merritt.
No, nothing yet.
Okay. Great. Well, I think that's all. Yeah, we do have, you know, 90 minutes, long-term help if you want someone to kind of project manage the B Corp assessment. If you have any other questions, please email us. I'll put my email in the chat. Well, thanks, Merritt. Here's my email. Connect with us on LinkedIn. We're always here to, you know, help or talk about this. And we do this every month. So April 1st, Wednesday in April, we'll be doing this. If you just want to come and you're in a new place in the assessment, that's what we're here to talk about. So I think that's all, unless anybody has anything. I'm glad it was helpful. And stay tuned for next time.